Welcome back, everyone. So we have our next guest speaker. We have Paula Tusiani-Eng, and she will be speaking on advocating for BPD, a family journey toward hope and healing. So Paula is co-founder Matter Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to educate, support, and advocate for those impacted by borderline personality disorder. She received her master's in Divinity from Union Theological Seminary in 2001 and her master's in social work from Adelphi University in 2014. She received her certificate in nonprofit management from Adelphi University in 2019. Paula is the co-author with her mother, Bea Tusiani, of Remnants of a Life on Paper, a mother and daughter struggle with borderline personality disorder. She lost her young sister, Pamela Tusiani, who suffered from BPD at the age of 23 in 2001. Her passion for BPD education, resources, and advocacy is in her sister's memory to help others survive and thrive with BPD with access to mental health care needed to achieve a meaningful recovery. Paula lives with her husband and 4 children in Garden City, New York. So I'll hand it over to you, Paula. Would you like me to put the slides up now?
Sure. Thank you so much, Bailey, for inviting me to be a part of this amazing conference. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be with you. It's this afternoon here in New York, and I will be presenting on advocating for BPD, a family journey toward hope and healing. And I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about my lived experience as a family member. I had a sister with BPD, and I'm going to talk a little bit about her journey. And I'm going to talk about how we advocated as a family for Pamela. I'm going to talk a little bit about what advocacy has been like through Emotions Matter, through education, community, and political action. And then I'll just talk about some lessons learned at the end. And Bailey, feel free to keep me on time as I'm going through the slides. Okay. And so, it all starts with lived experience. And so this is a picture of me and my sister on the right and my mom and my sister on the left. My sister was Pamela Tusiani, and Pamela was diagnosed with BPD at the age of 19. She really had a very, we would like to, when we're looking back, think it was a very, kind of stable, normal childhood. We didn't really know that she was struggling with depression or that she had some social anxiety until she got to college. Things started to unravel for her a little bit. In her junior year of college, she had a nervous breakdown and wound up in the hospital near her college in Baltimore, Maryland. And this was when she was hospitalized for about a month. And this is when we started to see different types of behaviors that we had never seen before as a family. Pamela started to struggle with self-harm, with thoughts of suicidality. Her depression was deep, and she started to shut down from people in her life that had always been in her life. And we really didn't know what was going on. And remember, this was the late 90s, so it was a very different time, 20, 25, 28 years ago. As a family, we went to a lot of doctors, and we were pretty lucky in the sense that for the time that it was, about 6 months into Pamela's mental health journey, we got a diagnosis of BPD. But back then, there really weren't people treating BPD. And so we had information and a language, but we didn't really know what that was. And so, hold on a second, let me see my next slide. And so these are some examples of what Pamela was struggling with at the time. She was also an artist. And so these are pieces of her artwork. You can see on the left, a self-portrait of a girl with no face underwater. And what's so interesting about this is that my sister had jet black hair, and she also had darker skin. So she drew an image that was a self-portrait that was not actually like her. And she didn't know who she was. She really struggled with her identity, that no face, no features, that emptiness of what she felt inside. And the picture on the left is, she was really torn around, choices and behaviors and relationships and, that sort of black and white thinking and not knowing. She was torn always, every day, all the time about who she was and what she should do. And it really tortured her. And so these pieces, I feel like, kind of illustrate some of that, and often can bring thoughts and symptoms, to life. So during this period of time, Pamela was hospitalized about 9 times before we realized that she needed long-term care. She lived in a residential setting in Massachusetts for about a year and a half. And during that time, she had some periods of stability where she got a job and she was living in an apartment, and she wasn't always in intensive residential. And what did my family do at this time? They tried to read everything that they could about BPD. And back then, this was like almost, if you can imagine, pre-internet. I distinctly remember in New York City, when there were a lot of bookstores around, going with my mother to a Barnes and Noble that's no longer there, going to the psychology section, and we checked every book on the shelf, and we couldn't find one book about BPD. Thankfully, today that has changed. And so we struggled to find resources and just basic information. But my parents took copious notes every time they met with the doctor. They were taking notes, writing down what the doctor said, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. They did a lot of reading and a lot of research, and they listened to the doctors. They tried to, what I would say, be good patients. They tried to listen, to take the best steps that my sister needed to move forward at the time. My mom also had a very close relationship with my sister. And when I asked my mom, I'm sorry that my slides are looking a little funky here, but, when I asked my mom, what did you do at this time? And this was before programs like Family Connections, which exist today. But my mom did whatever she could at the time for family therapy, working with a private therapist. And she learned about boundary setting, especially when it came to Pam's behaviors, which were scary. And, we wanted to keep her safe from her thoughts. And so there was a lot of focus on, setting consequences and limits, encouraging her to be independent, but taking responsibility for her actions, and expressing feelings. And so these are some situations that, my mom recalled times and words that she used with my sister around boundary setting. And this is a little hard to see, but my sister was also, in addition to being an artist, and I sit behind me with a lot of her artwork on the wall, she was also a poet, and a lot of her poetry and writing emerged during the course of her therapy. Everything that she was keeping inside for all these years started to just explode in artwork everywhere, explode on the paper. And, this poem in the middle, which it's a little hard to read, but she says, a hammer smashes harshly against my cranium, cold red blush fancies my raw skin, chattering teeth, quivering hands. I want out. She was in so much internal pain. And I know that's so common to the BPD experience, that what you're feeling on the inside is so intense. And there was never a time in my own family journey that I didn't understand that this was the disorder and not her. I knew she was in so much pain, and we were just really trying to help her manage that in whatever way that we could. At one point, because of her behaviors, unfortunately, when she was in Massachusetts, she was really struggling with addiction. And so we realized that for her to get better, she needed to be in a different type of residential setting where she could work on getting sober. And so fortunately, we found a place in California that would take her. And she made a lot of progress there. She was sober 11 months. She started to go back to school. She had a boyfriend. She was living in an apartment. She was driving a car, made a lot of progress while she was there. But unfortunately, she also, was still struggling with the BPD on the inside. The internal symptoms lingered for her because she was never getting any treatment for her BPD. She was really being treated for depression. So at one point, the doctors, when she was there, said, let's change her medicine. And they said to my parents, why don't we put her on a class of drugs that's not really used too much anymore? They're called MAOI inhibitors. They were very popular in the 1950s, and they have a lot of food restrictions, so we don't give them out too much anymore. But this, Pamela's been on everything else. Let's try it. And my mother, very astutely, who had done the homework, said, my daughter has BPD. She can be impulsive. How is she going to stay away from all these foods? And the doctor said, oh, well, don't worry. When she's here eating in the cafeteria for lunch, we'll monitor her foods. We'll make sure that she's compliant. And unfortunately, about 6 weeks into the new medicine, there was pizza served in the cafeteria one day. One of the contraindicated foods with Parnate, which is an MAOI inhibitor, is cheese. And my sister had a stroke. She had a massive stroke and she died 2 days later. And, obviously it was a devastating tragedy for my family because we thought she was finally coming out of this. For her to die from a kind of, well, basically her meds weren't being managed properly from a very rare side effect. But what ensued afterwards is really what inspired us to get involved in advocacy. So it all started for us with the courts. Because when my sister died the way she did, my parents felt someone needs to be responsible. My daughter should not have died. And so what happened was they filed lawsuits against the facility she was living in and UCLA Medical Center, which was the hospital that treated her. And the facilities immediately said that it was an attempted suicide, which my parents were not happy with. We're Italians from New York, and my sister had tried ending her life many times because of BPD. And we knew that her way to go would not have been eating pizza. Pizza would have been something very enjoyable for her. And so, unfortunately, though, it was sort of this 3-year lawsuit that ensued. And what we discovered during the discovery phase of the lawsuit was that the facility she was living in at the time lied about their JCAHO accreditation. So my mother wrote letters all the way to the Attorney General of California, and not too much happened in the end. My parents had to go through hours and hours of depositions in which they were blamed for not being responsible parents, and they were blaming my parents for her death. That you shouldn't have sent your daughter to California. You should have kept her close to home if you were really worried about her. It was really, for me as a surviving daughter in my late 20s at the time, to see my parents being, not only were they traumatized from the loss of their daughter and everything they had been through with BPD with my sister, to then now being accused in the courts of it being their fault when really the system was responsible. It wasn't okay. And so ultimately, my brother and I decided that we did not want to go to trial because we felt like we didn't want my parents to have to be on the stand for all those days and have to endure that kind of suffering. So we settled the lawsuits in 2003 from the depositions, and my parents founded, with the settlements from the lawsuit, the BPD Resource Center at New York Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. So their first action of advocacy as a family after Pamela passed, the first action of advocacy, of course, was through the courts. But the second action of advocacy was charitable giving. They decided to take that money and to put it into good. And the one thing that my parents felt all through their journey was that they never had BPD specialists. They never had people that really understood BPD, and my sister was never getting BPD treatment per se. And they didn't want other families to go through what they went through. So the BPD Resource Center this year is celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's hard to believe, right? But we founded it in 2003, so it's 20 years old. It's helped millions of people since its inception. It's a free toll-free line where you can call. There's a live social worker. It maintains the largest database in the world of BPD trained clinicians and resources. You can go on their website. You can send an email and say, wherever you are in the world, I live in this country or this state, I have BPD, I'm looking for a BPD trained clinician, can you help me? And they will search the database. It's not perfect, as you know, because not all people take insurance and et cetera, but at least they'll try to find you resources that are reliable from what's in their database. And we're very proud of that as a family. And I always have to start by giving my parents a shout out, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for my sister, but also if it wasn't for my parents. So the second part of the advocacy was my mother actually by training is a writer. She used to write for the Long Island section of the New York Times and New York Newsday here in New York. And when my sister passed, her grief was so devastating that she needed to write about it because that was her way of getting her stories out. And this was going to be cathartic for her. But it was really hard for her to put the pieces together, and so My sister left behind copious diaries with all of her writing. There was boxes and boxes, like a full room in our house full of boxes of depositions from the lawsuits, boxes from all my parents' notes. And I said, all right, Mom, I'll help you. One day a week over a 4-year period from 2006 to 2000, roughly 11, maybe it was 5 years. When my children were being born, we wrote one day a week for several years, and we tried to piece together the narrative of my sister's life. And the book came out in 2013 called Remnants of a Life on Paper. It was, we took the excerpts from the trial, the deposition from my sister's diaries, and then my mother's narrative to try to tell a cohesive story about what really happened. And our goal is really just to raise awareness, because now remember, this was still 2000, 10 years ago, the book came out, and there still was not a lot on the market then from a family perspective about BPD. And so we published the book, and we would go anywhere in those first few years and speak for free. You can see us at some different, panels and presentations. And what would inevitably happen is that people would come up to us and say, I have BPD, or I want to get involved. How can we get involved? And that is eventually why I decided to start Emotions Matter. In 2015, I invited all the people that we met from our book tours and our book talks to be a part of the NAMI Walk in New York City, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And on that day, I met my founding partners of Emotions Matter. And as we were walking in New York City, we realized that there really was no nonprofit organization in the United States that was built for people with BPD to advocate for themselves, to get peer support, to deal with the treatment access issues, and for stigma-free information. There were family organizations, and there were research organizations, and there were clinician organizations, but there was no organization for people with the disorder themselves that they could own from a lived experience perspective. And so that really gave the birth to Emotions Matter. Emotions Matter, our mission is to support, educate, and advocate for people with BPD. Our vision is that every person impacted by BPD has access to treatment and resources to achieve a meaningful recovery. Our vision is that to create a world in which every person with BPD has what they need to get better, so that your story doesn't have to be my story or many, many other people's story that are suffering with this disorder. We founded as an organization in December of 2015, so we're about 8 years old. And I'm just going to talk now a little bit about the work that we do and the kind of ways that we advocate as an organization. Let's see. Hold on. Switch my slides. Okay, so our philosophy and our values, we are peer driven. So we promote leadership in our organization by people with BPD. Our board chair has BPD. Our board vice president has BPD. Every one of our committees at Emotions Matter, the Education Committee, the Diversity Committee, our Advocacy Committee, our Program Evaluation Committee, the work of the organization is done with people with BPD and family members and clinicians working together. So we are multiple stakeholders working together around the same mission. We're recovery oriented. We intentionally use recovery language because we believe that if we don't say the word recovery, people are not going to believe that they can get better. And so we use recovery oriented language. We also integrate, we don't offer treatment, but we do integrate best practices from treatments into the work we do. And we're really empowerment focused and justice seeking, which I'll explain in a minute. In the beginning of our early years, and I'm going pretty quickly, Bailey, because I can see the time that we just have 10 minutes. So again, you can flag me. But in our early years, we, before the pandemic, I call those our early years, we were out anywhere we could go out in the Metro New York area where we were bringing information about BPD to the community. We were there. We were always doing community health fairs and walks, and we did a suicide prevention rally in Washington Square Park. We were just always out trying to create resources and get them out into the community just to start developing a name for ourselves in the Metro New York area. We also had empowering events, like our first art show was in 2017. We would go to colleges and universities and speak about BPD, conferences, etc. We also did some political advocacy in our early years. We were involved in a petition to bring more research to NIMH for the National Institute on Mental Health for BPD. That petition got 5,000 signatures on change.org, and it eventually led to the first ever brochure being produced by NIMH about BPD in English, which is on the next page right here. That was as a result of our advocacy. We also got 13 members of Congress to sign a letter to try to get BPD in the 21st Century Cures Bill. While we were not successful with that effort, we were trying in our early years in Washington to get more information out there about BPD. After the pandemic, we pivoted. All of our programs and events really went to Zoom. And fortunately, we already had a peer online support group that we had been developing from 2016 to 2018. So when the pandemic hit, we were already online with groups, so we were in a good position to expand our services. Before the pandemic, we were offering 2 online peer groups a month. And during the pandemic, at our highest, we expanded up to 10 groups a month. Now we're in the range of 7 to 10, depending on how many volunteers we have a month. Our groups are held on Zoom. We created this peer group model with people with BPD who isolated things that mattered to them in their recovery. We train our volunteers, and our program is based on 4 recovery principles: advocacy, trust, community, and purpose. And it's really focused on problem-solving strategies for moving forward in your recovery. You can find out about our support groups on Zoom, and they are open to anybody, anywhere. And I'm going to skip over the slide about testimonials. Other programs that we offer at Emotions Matter, we have our wellness workshops. So we have a writing workshop that's run monthly by people with BPD, our resident poet, Kaylee Pezzi. We have our BPD Caring Card program, where when you are in need of some kind words from somebody with BPD, you can go to our website, fill out the form for a card, and you will receive a card in the mail. We've sent many to Canada as well. Oh, don't flood me with the international postage, but we do send plenty of cards over the border, and digital cards as well. And then we do have a grief support group for people that have lost loved ones to BPD, so that they can meet others that understand the grief journey. We do advocacy through education, and we have a lot of materials in print. Our BPD fact sheet, our peer tips for finding a therapist. We have our single case agreements when you're calling the insurance company, you need to know what to say. We have our BPD in schools brochure, how to advocate for accommodations in schools. Plenty of materials. Our calendar style publication about BPD, 17 of the most commonly asked questions from a peer perspective. So all of these are mostly available as free downloads on our website, so feel free to check it out. But we believe that the first step toward advocacy is education, right? Understanding what you have and how to move forward is critical. So we put out a lot of videos and content. We also have peer resources on our website. You know what? I don't think this video, I have a video I was going to share with you that really captures how we do advocacy through the community. Every year for the past 5 years, we have a walk for BPD, probably similar to the Sash Bear walk, but it's our walk where we walk in New York City, but also people walk virtually. And it's really just a time for everyone to come together, and we celebrate recovery. And we lift up recovery stories in the walk, and it's incredibly inspiring. This really fits with our philosophy through our peer groups. We believe that recovery happens through education, but it also helps by finding just one other person who understands, right? And whether that comes through a peer group, whether that comes through showing up at one of our events, like our open mic nights or our art shows or our walks, it's really important to develop a community. And that's really what helped my sister. Every time she was really improving, it was because she had the power of relationships. Her AA community was really important to her. And I see it all the time at Emotions Matter that, relationships really matter, and being in a validating, warm, supportive community with people that understand is just really critical. So yes, we do have empowering events as well. This fall, we had an art show where we had artists from around the country submit their art, and it was covered on Fox News here in New York. there's great video on the website about that, and then also pictures from our walk. And our virtual conference. So one of the other things that we did during the pandemic was we pivoted, and when we couldn't do our walk, we created a virtual conference. The first year it was a 3-day conference because everybody was really stuck inside. And last year it was a full-day conference. Now it's a half-day conference, but it will be in 2 weeks on May 13th. It's a free ticket if you have lived experience with BPD, so feel free to join us. But we have about 28 volunteers with BPD that will be running different panels. In fact, Bailey will be on one of the panels talking about peer interventions for recovery. But come join us. We also have fabulous chat rooms this year where people in underserved, diverse communities can meet each other. So the conference is really fun and exciting and a great way to connect. And of course, we have our virtual and in-person walk coming up on June 4th. And let's see. Lessons learned. Again, I'm not sure why my slides are just a little funky when I did the slide share. But, when I asked my mom, what were some lessons that you learned, through the experience with Pamela? And these are her words. So be your own advocate to access resources, okay? Even when no one is giving you resources, go find ones that work for you. Do not be afraid to keep digging. Take notes when you're speaking with doctors, because a lot of times they're throwing a lot of information at you at once, and it can be really overwhelming. If you're a loved one or if you have BPD, take notes, write it down. You could always go back to your notes later, but at least you have notes. Trust your instincts, right? I always say to people with BPD when they say, what should I do? I say, you know yourself pretty well. What do you think you should do? You trust your instincts. If you know something's not right about you, if you don't feel safe right now, do what you need to do and trust your instincts. And don't leave someone alone when you're worried about them. My mom feels many times that we should not have left Pamela alone, and especially in California when we couldn't have a second set of eyes on her. So always remember when there's safety involved to never, always have compassion, because what your loved ones are going through is something. Nobody wants to have this disorder. No one wakes up and says they want to have BPD. It is devastating and the symptoms are severe. So we just want to have compassion. Seek social support, communicate as a family as much as possible. Ask for the credentials of mental health care facilities and verify them, something that we never did. I wish we did when it came to the facility that my sister was living in. Some things from me that I would say in my experience of working at Emotions Matter, don't be afraid to articulate what you need. It's so hard for people to ask for help when they're suffering intensely, but you have a legal and human right to mental health care, just like physical health care. And unfortunately, the system that we're living in is not fair, and there is discrimination against people with BPD. The mental health system does not make it easy for people to get care because there's not enough providers. Most treatment is not covered by insurance. It's extremely expensive, and it's really not fair. So we always begin by validating the truth and the real barriers that people experience. It's true, it's real, and we validate it. And it adds to sometimes people's feeling of rejection and invalidation. And then we have incredible compassion, and we say, we understand, but you know what? You can get better. Come meet some other people that have gotten better. Come join our community. We understand. We can give you some resources, some educational tools that can help you to advocate for yourself in the system, right? And education and community are really a critical path forward. So those are some of my tips from my mom, and then also from myself. Feel free to reach out to us at Emotions Matter. And I could totally, take some questions now, and I don't know how to unshare the slides, but.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Paula. There was a lot of hope and inspiration in your share, and I've always wanted to go to New York, and now I have even more reason to go. I'm just curious about, for your programs that you have, some of the virtual ones with the support groups, including for survivors of suicide. Are they available to folks worldwide, including Canada, for some of our listeners?
Absolutely. Yeah. As I said before, our groups are open to everybody. We have people come internationally now because they're on Zoom. Absolutely. Due to the generosity of our fundraisers, our donors, and our sponsors, our support groups online are offered at no cost to the community because we know that people need to spend money on treatment. And we believe from an equity perspective that peer support should be, widely accessible and available.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And if anyone that's listening has any questions for Paula in regards to your family story or any of your programs and services, this is a good time to ask that in the chat. Amanda Smith says, so thankful for Emotions Matter. Yeah, you're doing a whole lot of great advocacy work, and it's inspirational for us as an organization too, like different things that you're doing. We'd love to do an art show and some really creative ideas like your the caring cards. I love that idea. And Kathy Wilson is asking for a link to your website. I think it's emotionsmatter.org. Is that right?
Yep, it's www.emotions, EMOTIONS, matter, MATTER, BPD.org. And thanks, Leslie and Amanda, for the shout out. Lovely to see you. And I agree, Bailey, that we're all learning from each other in different spaces, and we're all trying to work to help people with BPD. And there's no market on innovation. So any way that we can share and collaborate, which is why I'm really grateful for this invitation today.
Of course. Yeah, it sounds like our mission is very similar, if not the same. So I'm glad that we could collaborate, and I look forward to presenting at your conference.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye-bye. Good luck. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Take care. And we'll be back at 2 o'clock with our next speaker. And if you would like any more information about our services or to donate, you can go to our website, www.bpdbc.ca. See you shortly.